The storm had been building all day, but inside their apartment the tension was thicker than the rain outside. Thunder rolled low across the skyline as Daniel Vega shoved his arm through the sleeve of his police uniform, his jaw set like stone. He didn't look at Elena. He hadn't looked at her properly in months. "Don't leave like this," she said, her voice breaking as her hand pressed against the curve of her belly. She stood barefoot by the window, watching the rain paint the glass with crooked lines. Her hair clung damp to her face, her eyes swollen from nights without sleep. Daniel's silence was louder than shouting. He picked up his badge, clipped it to his belt, and finally turned. But his eyes were hard, empty. "I can't do this anymore." Her breath caught. "Can't do what? Be a husband? A father?" He flinched, almost imperceptibly. She hadn't told him about the pregnancy. Part of her had been waiting for the right time, for him to soften, to find his way back to the man she married. But the man in front of her was armor, all edges and cold steel. "You think I can come home after the things I see out there?" His voice was sharp, bitter. "I drag blood through this door every night. I wake up to gunshots in my head. And then I see you, waiting, expecting me to smile. I don't have anything left to give." Her tears spilled. "I never wanted perfection, Daniel. I wanted you. Just you." For a second, his eyes flickered with something. Pain, regret, maybe even love. But it drowned quickly beneath pride. He grabbed his jacket, swung open the door, and stepped into the storm. The wind howled through the apartment like a warning, rattling the picture frames on the wall. Elena's knees buckled, but she caught herself against the table. Her free hand moved instinctively to her stomach. 3 heartbeats pulsed inside her, but Daniel only knew silence. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot. The weeks that followed blurred together in shades of gray. Papers filed. Lawyers consulted. The hollow sound of her wedding ring clattering into a drawer she never opened again. Daniel never called, never asked, and when the day of the divorce arrived, she walked into the courthouse with her back straight, though every step felt like broken glass. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and ink, sterile and final. Elena sat at one end of the long oak table, her loose dress disguising the secret she still held. Across from her, Daniel sat rigid, his badge catching the courtroom light like a cruel reminder of his devotion to duty, not to her. The judge read the documents with the indifference of a man who had seen 1,000 marriages crumble. "Irreconcilable differences," the judge intoned, as though the words were sacred. Elena kept her face still, her eyes trained on the pen in her hand as she signed her name. Her heart screamed, but her hand was steady. Daniel signed next, his expression a mask. For one fleeting moment his eyes darted toward her, but when their gazes met, he looked away. Pride again. Pride louder than love. The gavel struck, and that was it. Years of promises, gone in the hollow thud of wood against wood. Elena rose slowly, her lawyer's voice buzzing in her ears but meaning nothing. She had carried his absence long before she carried his children. This was just paper confirming what her heart already knew. She pushed open the courthouse doors into the corridor, but the world tilted beneath her. Her vision swam, the lights above smearing into white streaks. She stumbled, clutching her stomach. People rushed forward. Voices overlapped. She caught only fragments. "Call the nurse." "She's fainting." "She's pregnant, isn't she?" Her body gave in before her voice could. Darkness swept in like a tide. When she opened her eyes, she smelled antiseptic and heard the steady beep of machines. White walls surrounded her, the distant shuffle of nurses' shoes echoing. Her throat was dry, her body heavy, but the whispers around her pierced through. Not one heartbeat. 3. She's carrying triplets. Tears blurred her vision. Her hand trembled as she pressed it to her stomach. She had wanted to wait to tell him. She had wanted a moment of hope, a spark of joy to break through the storm. But now he was gone, and the secret was hers alone. Elena turned her face to the side, sobbing quietly so the nurses wouldn't hear. "You'll never feel abandoned," she whispered to the life growing inside her. "Not like I did. I'll fight for you. I'll love you enough for both of us." Rain tapped softly against the hospital window. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside Elena Vega a new war had begun, one she would fight alone, against the shadows of regret, against the weight of betrayal, and against the silence Daniel had left behind. Her tears slowed, but the promise remained, burning brighter than grief. The triplets shifted inside her, tiny reminders of the future. The man who had walked away would regret it one day. Of that, Elena was certain. And as she drifted into uneasy sleep, the narrator's voice hovered like a ghost. Some choices echo louder than gunfire. And some regrets arrive too late to fix what has already broken. The apartment was small, too small for 4 souls, but it became a battlefield of love and exhaustion. Nights blurred into mornings, bottles scattered like fallen soldiers across the kitchen counter, diapers stacked in uneven towers. Elena moved through it all like a soldier herself, hair tied back hastily, eyes ringed with shadows, body aching but spirit unbroken. 3 tiny cries rose and fell like a chorus, each voice demanding her attention, pulling her in 3 different directions. She learned to rock one with her foot, feed another with one arm, and sing softly to the third clutched against her chest. Some nights she wept quietly into their blankets, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. But when those little eyes looked up at her, wide and trusting, she found strength she didn't know she had. Neighbors whispered. Some pitied her. Some admired her resilience. Some judged. But none of them understood what it felt like to lie awake at 3 a.m., all 3 children screaming, the city outside roaring with sirens and engines, and know you had no one to lean on. She tried to stretch every dollar. She worked part-time tutoring when she could. Her mother came once a week with groceries. But most of the time it was Elena against the world. Her body carried scars of sleeplessness, but her heart carried fire. Still, there were nights when the fear crept in. It started small. A slip of paper wedged beneath her door with words scrawled in rough ink. You think you're strong, but you're not. She thought it was a cruel joke, tossed it into the trash. Then came another. You can't raise them alone. He left for a reason. Her stomach turned to ice. She tore the note apart, but the words clung to her mind. By the 3rd message, her hands shook as she read, They'll never be safe without him. The letters carried no signature, only smudges of doubt and the faint smell of smoke. Elena didn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? A divorced woman stretched thin by 3 infants? They would say she was imagining it. One evening, after finally putting the babies to sleep, she sat by the window. The city lights glowed hazy through the glass, but a darker shape moved on the street below. A man, standing too long, looking up at her window. Her breath caught. By the time she blinked, he was gone. She closed the curtains tightly, heart pounding. The weeks dragged on, tension knotting her chest tighter each day. She laughed when she could, when one of the triplets babbled their first word, when all 3 fell asleep at once, when a tiny hand reached up to touch her cheek. But underneath the laughter was fear. Fear that grew sharper with every creak of the floorboards at night, every knock on the door that came too late, every shadow that lingered outside her window. One night, the fear became real. It started with glass. A shattering crash tore through the quiet apartment. Elena jerked awake, her body seizing with adrenaline. The babies screamed instantly, their cries shrill with terror. Her bare feet hit the cold floor as she ran. A figure was inside, dark and broad, the glint of metal in his hand. She froze, heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Instinct took over. She scooped the children into her arms, her body curling protectively around them. The intruder moved closer. His steps were slow, deliberate, like a predator savoring the chase. She ducked into the closet, pulling the door shut with trembling hands. Darkness swallowed them. Her chest rose and fell in quick bursts, the baby's wails muffled against her shoulder. Outside, footsteps scraped. Then silence. Then the sharp drag of something metallic across the wall. The sound etched itself into her mind, scratching deep like a wound. Her pulse roared in her ears. She whispered softly to the children, desperate to calm them, desperate not to be heard. Then a single word came from the living room, low and cold. Mine. The closet door rattled. Her scream caught in her throat, but the sound never came. Suddenly, sirens blared outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the thin curtains. The front door slammed shut. Footsteps retreated. By the time officers burst in, the intruder was gone. The living room was chaos, shattered glass, overturned chairs, and one haunting detail left behind. Etched deep into the plaster wall, scratched with deliberate force, was a number. Elena stared at it as an officer shone his flashlight across the surface. Do you recognize this? Her stomach dropped. Her skin went cold. She didn't need to read it twice. It was a badge number. Daniel's. The room spun. She clutched the triplets tighter, fear and disbelief twisting inside her. Her breath trembled as she whispered to herself, Why his number? The officers exchanged glances, suspicion in their eyes, but Elena barely saw them. She was trapped in her own storm again, her mind racing with questions. Was it him? Was someone framing him? Or had his past finally come crashing into her fragile new world? The triplets whimpered against her chest, and she pressed her lips to their foreheads, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. I won't let anyone hurt you. Not him. Not anyone. But deep inside, fear grew sharper, a shadow stretching long across her fragile piece. And as the city sirens faded into the night, she knew this was only the beginning. Daniel sat in his patrol car long after his shift had ended, the engine humming like a restless animal. The city spread out in front of him, neon lights flickering against puddles left by a recent rain. But all he could see was her face, Elena's face, etched into his mind the way it had been the night he walked out. Eyes wet with betrayal, lips trembling with the words she never got to say. He thought leaving would free him, that cutting ties would cut away the shame he carried, the secrets he never wanted her to know. But every silence since had been louder than her voice. Every night alone had been emptier than the arguments that once filled their walls. And now, a call from dispatch had cracked his world open again. An apartment break-in. A mother. 3 children. His badge number scratched into the wall. He hadn't even realized he was gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He went to the precinct, demanded answers, but the looks he received were colder than the rain dripping from his jacket. Strange coincidence, his captain had muttered, though suspicion flickered in his eyes. Coincidence? No, Daniel thought. This was a message. He drove past Elena's street that night. Lights glowed dim in her window, shadows moving gently against the curtains. For a moment he imagined it, her rocking the children to sleep, humming softly. His children. He wanted to climb the stairs, knock on her door, tell her everything. How regret had eaten him alive, how he was sorry, how he still loved her. But the words turned to ash on his tongue. Instead, he parked a block away and sat there for hours, watching, guarding, though she would never know. Days bled into nights. The notes didn't stop. Elena kept finding them, slipped beneath her door, left in her mailbox, one even scrawled across her car windshield in chalk. She felt hunted, watched. Each time, the message cut deeper, you can't escape him. And every time, Daniel felt the walls close in tighter. One evening, he finally approached her door. His knock was quiet, hesitant. For a long moment, no answer. Then the latch clicked, and there she was. Her face was thinner, shadows under her eyes deeper than he remembered. She held one of the triplets on her hip, the other 2 cooing softly behind her. Her gaze hardened the instant it landed on him. You have 5 seconds to tell me why you're here, she said, her voice low but sharp. I just wanted to make sure you were safe, he stammered. She laughed bitterly. Safe? With you? Don't insult me. Elena, please. Someone's trying to hurt you. Those notes, the break-in, this isn't random. Her eyes narrowed. Then why was your badge number carved into my wall? Silence. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth was a tangled knot inside him. Corruption he'd seen in the department, enemies he'd made on the streets, the one mistake years ago that had cost him everything. But how could he explain without destroying her completely? Instead, he whispered, because whoever's doing this, they know me, and they know that hurting you is the only way to destroy me. Her grip tightened around the child. Then you stay away from us. Forever. The door slammed. The echo rattled inside him long after he stepped back into the rain. But Daniel couldn't stay away. He shadowed her quietly, unseen. He followed her to the market, to the doctor's office, to the park where she sat on a bench, cradling all 3 babies at once. Each time he saw her laugh with them, his chest ached with longing and regret. Meanwhile, the threats escalated. A brick crashed through her window, wrapped in a note, "He won't save you this time." One night she swore she heard footsteps pacing outside her bedroom door, though it was locked from the inside. Fear turned her apartment into a prison. Finally, Daniel couldn't take it anymore. He confronted her again, voice urgent. "You're not safe here. Let me help you." She glared. "Help? You broke me, Daniel. You left me to carry everything alone. Do you know what that felt like? Do you know how many nights I held them and wished you were dead because it would hurt less than knowing you chose to leave?" The words sliced him open. He wanted to fall to his knees, beg her forgiveness. Instead, his voice cracked. "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you from me. But all I did was abandon you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "It's too late." Before he could answer, the lights flickered. A sharp pop echoed from the street below. Elena froze, clutching the children. Daniel's instinct screamed. He pulled his gun, moved to the window. There, across the street, a shadow stood. Watching. The figure raised something in his hand, metal catching the streetlight. A gun. Daniel shouted for her to get down. Glass shattered as the first shot tore through the window. Elena screamed, shielding the babies with her body. Daniel fired back, but the shadow melted into the night, footsteps pounding into the distance. Silence crashed down. Daniel turned, chest heaving, and saw Elena trembling on the floor, clutching the triplets. Her eyes, wide and terrified, locked on his. And for the first time, beneath the anger and hatred, he saw something else in her gaze. Fear that he was the only one who could keep them alive. Outside, sirens wailed closer. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and broken glass. And as the red and blue lights painted their faces, Daniel realized the truth. He was out of time. Whoever haunted them was closing in. And this war wasn't just Elena's anymore. It was his too. The night carried a suffocating stillness, the kind that pressed against the skin and made every breath feel heavy. Elena sat on the living room floor, the triplets bundled against her chest, their small cries muffled by the blankets. Shards of glass from the shattered window crunched under Daniel's boots as he paced like a caged animal. The sting of blood lingered at the corner of his lip where the glass had cut him earlier, but he didn't flinch. His eyes burned, restless, hunting for shadows that weren't there. Elena kept her gaze on him, a swirl of terror and resentment. Every line in her face was sharpened by exhaustion. "This is what you bring into our lives," she whispered, not out of anger but despair. "I didn't bring it," he said, voice raw. "It followed me, and now it's after you." She shook her head, rocking the children instinctively. "I told you to stay away." "I can't." His voice cracked, carrying all the weight of years spent running from her memory. "I left once, and it's the only thing I regret. If I leave again, you and them might not survive this. So hate me, Elena, but don't push me out now." Before she could reply, a sound thundered through the hallway, a door crashing open, boots pounding. The apartment's thin walls shivered with impact. A voice, guttural and mocking, echoed, "Time to finish what he started." The intruder was inside. Daniel's instincts took over. He shoved the couch toward the doorway, a weak barricade, and pulled his gun free. "Stay down," he hissed, his voice urgent but steady. Elena clutched the babies tighter, curling her body around them. The man appeared in the doorway, eyes wild, the muzzle of his weapon catching the dim light. He grinned at the sight of Daniel. "Officer," he spat the word like poison. "Thought you could walk away from the mess you made?" Daniel raised his gun. His pulse thundered in his ears, but his grip was firm. "It ends tonight." The first shot split the air. Daniel dove sideways, the bullet grazing his arm as the wall behind him exploded with plaster. He returned fire, short, brutal bursts. The apartment filled with smoke, the cries of the babies cutting through the chaos. They collided in the narrow space, gun knocked away, fists striking, bodies crashing against furniture. Daniel's ribs screamed with pain as a boot connected, but he fought back with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. Years of guilt fueled each blow. The intruder snarled, dragging a knife from his belt. The blade gleamed inches from Daniel's throat. Time slowed. He could feel Elena's scream trapped in the air, the children's cries breaking like glass. His hands shook, but then he pushed back with everything inside him. The knife clattered away. Daniel slammed the man against the wall, once, twice, until his body sagged, breath shallow, fury drained. But the fire in his eyes never dimmed. "You'll never outrun what you are," the man rasped before collapsing. Sirens wailed outside. Neighbors shouted in the hallway. The world spun, but Daniel stood frozen, chest heaving, blood dripping down his side. He turned to Elena. She was still on the floor, clutching the triplets, her face wet with tears. But her gaze had changed. The hatred was still there, but softened by something else: fear, relief, and a reluctant acknowledgement that without him, they would all be dead. Daniel staggered closer, dropping to his knees. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered, "but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it, if you let me." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the sirens growing louder, the baby's soft whimpers. Elena's lips trembled, words caught between anger and mercy. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but she didn't push him away either. And maybe that was enough. The red and blue lights flooded the room as officers stormed in, weapons drawn. Daniel raised his hands, blooded and exhausted. He felt the weight of their stays, the questions that would follow, the storm of consequences waiting. But as he looked back at Elena and the children, something inside him steadied. For the first time since the divorce, he felt a spark of purpose. The night had been fire and blood, but from it, something fragile had emerged. Redemption was not a prize handed freely, it was a war fought every day. And as Daniel let the paramedics lead him away, his final thought was not of regret, but of resolve. Because no matter what came next, he would never leave them again.